We're trying to undo patterns that you have held on to for years.
If your grandma grew up during the Depression, there's going to be a lot of things that are instilled then that go to your mom or your dad, that go to you, that you don't know where that came from. That's a barrier. And guess what? You can break that cycle. It's just taking awareness and recognition of that and how it's affecting you.
Let's link up with Krysta on the FYX. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
What's happening, FYX listeners? Welcome back to our latest episode of the FYX podcast. I'm your host, Krysta Huber, and we are back once again this week with an awesome conversation with a fellow fitness and nutrition coach. And that is my friend, Meryl Binder, founder of Wicked Iron Strength. I love the name of her brand. I love everything that her business stands for. Very similar to last week's guest, Rachel. This is one of those episodes where we just dive right into our nutrition coaching and fitness coaching philosophies and talk about how you, the listener, can apply them immediately into your life. There is one part of this episode that I love so much. You'll see it in the title. And I want to emphasize here in the introduction, as you'll hear Meryl emphasize it all the way at the very end. But it just stuck with me. We recorded this a few weeks ago, and I've been thinking about this since, and even thinking about it in my own life since. And that's the power behind the word yet. Specifically, the context of when we say, I can't do XYZ. And if you're listening to this podcast, maybe that is around losing weight, losing body fat, building muscle, making time for yourself, being consistent in your routine. There is so much to be said for shifting your perspective by simply adding one word, as Meryl describes it, and that's saying, I can't do, insert any example I just gave, yet. It opens up the door to possibility. It opens up this future that you can envision for yourself, that you are on the path to being able to make it happen. Love that statement. I think language is so important. And this is just a really fun episode between two coaches who I know are committed to helping clients yield results that actually last, so you can stop feeling like you're stuck on that dieting hamster wheel. Now, before we get into the episode, I want to give a quick shout out to one of our FYX partners, Legion Athletics. Legion is a new friend of the FYX podcast and of the Fitness FYX. And this week, they're back with another sale. Had one a couple weeks ago. If you missed out on it, the good news is this sale is specific for their protein powder. So this week through Wednesday, the 22nd, you can hop onto their website and get buy one, get one 50% off on their whey protein, their plant-based protein. I've tried both. They're fantastic. Some of my favorite flavors include the salted caramel. Recently tried the mocha cappuccino. Was a fan. I would still rank the salted caramel a little bit higher. And this month I'm diving into the chocolate peanut butter. So I'll keep you guys posted over on Instagram to let you know how I like it. But I am sure I'm going to love it. And why we love Legion so much is because if you were unaware, the supplements industry is pretty much the wild, wild west. There's no regulation, and there is unfortunately, very few brands that actually provide a lot of detail about what's included in their product. And that's what sets Legion apart. You can go on their website, you can get into the nitty gritty, you can look at the research and science behind how they formulate their products the way that they do. And when it comes to adding any sort of supplementation into the mix, as a nutrition coach who really encourages clients to consume whole food sources, Legion is something that I feel really good about bringing to our clients for the sake of convenience. If you're a busy person, what I love about their protein powder and how I would describe it to anybody is why it really stands out too, let alone the ingredients, but the fact that you don't need to doctor it up. And you guys know what I mean. There's certain protein powders out there that you're like, I cannot consume this unless I throw in a bunch of fruit, some ice, different peanut butter, all these different things, because otherwise it's just like gritty and chalky. We don't have time for that. This is the type of protein powder that you can literally throw in the shaker bottle, add almond milk, or maybe even just add water, shake it up, and you are good to go to get an extra 20 plus grams of protein. So I've been relying on it very heavily recently in the midst of a calorie deficit myself. Makes my life so much easier when I'm running out the door in the morning, and I can't recommend it enough. So go over to the show notes. There is a link to their website. Again, the discount for their current sale is buy one, get one 50% off on their protein products. And in addition to that, if you enter the code Coach Krysta at checkout, you will be supporting the show, but also stacking up reward points that you can use towards your next order. So go ahead and check them out. And with that, let's welcome Meryl to the FYX podcast. Meryl, welcome to the FYX podcast. I'm so excited for this conversation. So glad we had the chance to meet when we were out in Vegas. Start of a beautiful friendship. And as I mentioned pre-recording, I like to ask all my FYX guests, what's your go-to coffee order? What are you sipping on in the morning?
I am a straight black coffee drinker.
That's cool. I always say, I got this with my last guest, Adam. We were joking about it. And it's very common with us, fitness coaches. We like to be smart about our calories, right? So maybe you'd rather spend them somewhere else, which is totally okay.
Yeah. And I just love the taste of coffee. And I grew up with my dad is a super coffee snob. So
nice.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite brand?
Right now we just get Pete's coffee, but I like to try lots of different local coffee roasters. I'm like a medium, something not very acidic.
Nice. Love it. I love the specificity. See, there's nothing wrong with having a black coffee order if you can speak to it that way.
Yeah. I'm not crazy like people call black coffee drinkers. Just good.
I love it. Well, cool. So taking it in a totally different direction. Now that we know the important facts about you.
Yeah.
I love to ask guests something a little different to start the FYX podcast, because you could sit here and we will talk about, your experience in the fitness industry. You can talk about the certifications you have, the experiences that you have with clients will naturally come up inside this conversation, of course. But there's tons of coaches out there and there's tons of podcasts to listen to. So beyond the resume, who are you? Like at your core, why should we care about what you have to say? Why should someone want to listen to the rest of this podcast today?
Oh, I love this question. And I think it's such a cool question because people immediately define themselves as their job. And there's so much more to humans beyond that. So I love this question. I would describe myself just as a very passionate human being. I'm passionate. I'm compassionate. I am driven. And one of my just really big goals in life is to do cool shit and help other people do cool shit.
I love that. And I'm so glad you started off that way, because I was looking at one of your posts that you did, maybe it was like a week or so ago, but with like a lot of the places you visited. And I think there was like some skiing and other things mixed in there, right? And the messaging on it was just so aligned with what we talk about inside of the Fitness FYX around this idea of taking care of your body and putting healthy foods into your body should not be at the expense of you living your best life, right? Like, isn't that the whole point of what we're trying to do here? And it's unfortunate that we're getting far away from that with a lot of the other mixed messaging that's going on social media. So I'd love for you to just kind of unpack that. I know it's not necessarily a question, but to give your take on it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that that's part of the big barriers people face when they want to get into health, fitness, nutrition, whatever, better their well-being, is they think that it comes with sacrificing fun and sacrificing life experiences. And that's absolutely not the case whatsoever. We can integrate these things and make it all part of this really big, cool thing. So I think that that's something that I aim to, I don't know if I want to say prove, help people learn and help people create the life that they want. And I also, meeting you and listening to your podcast and seeing your posts, I was like, yes, this is in total alignment. So I love we're talking about this.
Yeah. And tell me, from your personal experience, did you ever have a point in your life where you felt like you were removing some of the fun, or you were getting away from that for yourself, that then has influenced your coaching and perspective?
Yeah, so much. I have personally, and like on the hindsight, it's way different, right? Hindsight's 2020. So I can see just how disordered I was coming at these things. But what I was really, really chasing, I think, my value in the world, how people perceived me, how I wanted people to like me, all of these things. And I was sacrificing so much of my true well-being in chasing these things and coming at fitness and nutrition specifically, and just how I treated myself from a place of like punishment and deficit and scarcity. So that was like, it was really one of those big wake up calls for me. I was like, I don't want to live my life like the rest of this. What is this? I want to have fun, right? I have this one life. And so that kind of forced me to really look at what I was doing and change that. And that was a really positive snowball effect.
Can you talk a little bit more about what that looked like for you? This idea of like wrapping up your self-worth in something that was actually pretty external, right? Because I think it's a motivator that a lot of people will rely on to get started. And to a degree, I don't want to say it's like the worst thing in the world for that reason, right? Like,
right.
If that's going to get you going, in a lot of ways, we can say there's benefit to that, but it has its breaking point. And even just relying on motivation is not the, most sound ground to stand on. But what for you, kind of give us like the before versus the after picture of your behaviors? Because what I've noticed a lot recently in conversations that I'm having with people is there's a part of them that knows that being restrictive or feeling like they have to say no to certain things, using the language of I should not, I can't, I have to. It's that devil and angel. Like there's the side of their brain that's like, I know that this is not going to serve me, but they still continue to do it anyway. So I think it'd be cool for someone listening to this, if they're kind of sitting in that in between, be able to hear what was coming up for you, where you started to recognize like, hey, this specific habit is not really getting me the lifestyle that I want to have, regardless of the physical results that I may have gotten you.
Okay, got it. So diving into some more specific mindset and behavior change aspects.
Yeah, like where you were and what made you have that recognition of like, hey, maybe this isn't the way for me to do it.
Okay, so I think that I had a really big fear of failure, which I see a lot in the people I work with. I'm sure you do as well.
Shout out to all our perfectionists, myself included.
Yes. So that goes into a lot of it. I was very much operating on an all or nothing. There was no spectrum. It was that or that. And so I think with the gym for me, I'll start with the gym and then I'll go into nutrition, was that the gym was something that I got in there because of my now husband, then boyfriend, really was when I got into the gym and started lifting, because I was always a cardio bunny and an athlete. But I did it because I thought that would make him happy. And I did quickly realize through lifting that it was very empowering, and it felt, I felt strong, and a lot more confident. And I also realized that it was a way for me to change my body, which was a positive.
Right. My point of the external, right? Like I'm so glad like that's exactly what I wanted you to kind of get into, because look, was not a bad reason for you to get started, especially to transition from being the cardio girly, like so many people are, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's like, maybe it wasn't the quote unquote best reasons to get in there. However, it got me in there, and I was able to, go through my journey and be where I am now and use it for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And the changes in my body like were great. I was like, oh, I'm leaning out, I'm gaining some body fat, or I'm losing some body fat. And like my body is turning into something that I always wanted, where I was seeking it in cardio before. And because I had some disorder in there, it was also like leading me into some not great things. And that was really in tune with the nutrition. As I started to focus on nutrition, I was coming at it from a restrictive standpoint. I did really learn a lot more about macronutrients at that point. So I learned like, oh, if I eat more protein, I can, like recover a little bit faster, gain a little bit more muscle. I feel full. It helps my sugar cravings, those type of things. But I was still in the mindset heavily for like, I want to be strong, but I also want to be smaller. And I want my body to look like this, but what the behaviors I was doing were not supporting me really feeling the way I wanted to feel, or even look the way I wanted to look. So making some shifts, like it was such a step-by-step thime where like I was on the paleo train, and then I went into some more macro-based things, and then I went into some more nutrient timing based things. So really learning how it affected my performance was so helpful for me. And then learning more about how my lack of nutrition was actually hindering me. And behaviorally, I was snacking a lot. I was going into the cabinet to eat a cookie and repetitively going back and couldn't stop myself and felt out of control. So a lot of behaviors that were like, this doesn't feel great for me. How can I, fix these things, but shift these things? So playing around with that, where it's like, okay, well, if I eat a more complete, bigger meal earlier in the day, that helps me snack less. I feel a lot less brain fog. I feel a lot more confident in myself, a lot more control in what I'm doing. And so noticing where my behaviors would shift when I did certain things was so helpful.
What I think is really important about the last piece of what you just said is so many people don't take the time to pay attention to any of that, to develop that self-awareness that you put into place. And obviously that's a really big piece of coaching, because that's what I usually see is the disconnect in you take a person who's never tracked their food before. And for as much as people want to bash food tracking as potentially being disordered, what you just highlighted is where it can be such a powerful tool in actually highlighting what may not be serving you. And I know we both work with populations of people who are very busy too, because that's the other piece that comes with this high achiever, the fear of failure. You're also piling a lot on your metaphorical plate of responsibilities. And then to make a joke about it, maybe not a whole lot on your food plate, right? Because why? Because you're being reactive. And we're being reactive when we're in this state of busyness. And yet the thing that makes me scratch my head so often is there's so much resistance to this idea of paying attention to what you're eating, like very intentionally with, say, again, I'll go back to the example of tracking your food. Yet you do it with so many other things. Like you would do it with your calendar if you know that you're really busy, right? And who actually looks forward to situations where, and I know you and I are not in this situation, but for anybody listening who has a corporate job, how much do you hate when you get a last minute meeting on your calendar, right? And you're like, oh, why did this person put this on my calendar? Isn't that kind of the same principle of you just like eating whatever and not paying attention to it, and then turning around and wondering why you don't feel well, right?
Yes. And I see it all the time. And I mean, I was there too. It is, you said spot on, reactive. It's so reactive. And any choices you're making that are in a reactive space are really not serving you, especially for the long term. They may feel good in the immediate short-term period, but long-term, you feel like crap about them. They're not supporting you. They're not aligning with how you want to feel or where you want to go. And the food tracking, I want to touch on that because I always tell my clients, like, I don't want you to have to track food for the rest of your life. This is a tool. And when you use it to create awareness, that's how we gain experience, which is that intuitive eating that everybody wants to get towards. That's experienced eating. So when you track, it's like, don't just throw, can I swear?
Oh yeah.
Don't just throw. Okay. I was like, don't just throw shit in your food tracker and move on with your day. Put it in there. Look at what it looks like. What does 4 ounces of cooked chicken breast look like to you? How do you feel when you eat a complete meal? How do you feel when you add in a donut intentionally? Pay attention to these things. That's what helps you to move forward with your life and feel so freaking in control, no matter what the situation looks like.
Yeah. The presence piece, coupled with the fact that how many people want to get to a place where they don't have to think about it. Like, let's talk through what are the steps. And you mentioned a great one of actually being present when you're looking at weighing your food, when you're looking at what's physically on your plate. What does it look like for somebody, the journey that you walk them through and getting them to that place of being able to say, yeah, I don't actually have to think too much about what I eat? Because I hear that as a goal for so many people. They're like, I just want to get to a place where I don't have to think about it. It's like, okay, that's awesome. But let's actually talk about what needs to happen before that. So maybe we start there and then you kind of talk through, like, if you were doing this with one of your clients, what signs do you see for them being ready to begin that intuitive eating journey, which I really liked the way you worded it. And what I like to say too is more around like the intentional piece, because that's really what it is. Like, I don't even like to say intuitive eating as much as I like to say intentional eating.
Yeah, I agree. I don't use the word intuition because people are like, I just want that. I'm like, okay, well, that takes experience and it takes tuning into yourself, like turn it up to 11. And that's where a lot of people skip that. And so that's where we really start. I'm like, if this is where you want to be, it's going to take so much of you tuning into yourself for a while. And like, let's practice, because trial and error, that also takes, learning from fails, learning from things you don't feel great about. So that's kind of the stair step we go through is, if someone's going to track, there's going to be awareness with it, because if they're not, then why the heck are we doing it? It's not going to help you, really. So a lot of, in my check-ins with my clients, I ask questions that help them reflect on those things. We'll give people exercises to go through. I'll even have people go, special events or occasions. Hey, I do not want you to actually use your tracker, or, hey, I do want you to use your food tracker. And it's totally okay if you go over in the macros or you're over in your calories. But like, let's gain some skills here. Let's gain some experience with what it looks like in the numbers and with how you feel about how you approached it. And then again, if they're, hey, I don't want you to track, let's tune in with yourself and be present and mindful and focus on how that feels for you too.
Yeah, it's creating that, again, just going back to this piece around like developing the self-awareness. The coaching aspect is creating the container to have those types of conversations, right? Because I couldn't tell you that I was thinking about these things on my own. And when I first started my own journey of having the first ever coach that I worked with from the nutrition aspect, it was because I was scratching my head being like, I think I eat really healthy. So what is this disconnect here? Yeah. And I love your point about special events, going out to eat, travel, vacations, because most recently with coming off of spring break for a lot of clients, something that I've been so excited about this week and to be able to share as client wins are the number of clients that we have inside of the Fitness Fix who have been working with us for a while. And maybe in that time, they haven't necessarily gone on like a longer trip of like, 4, 5, 6+ days. So there's this really exciting moment as a coach where they come into it and they're like leading up to the 2-3 weeks before the trip. And obviously we use events and trips to set goals, and they're great for that, right? Like, I love when we can establish a timeline that may be based on you wanting to both look and feel your best for a certain event. Cool, let's do it. But then there is this line of 2-3 weeks before the trip, they start to develop some nerves around the fact that their routine's going to change. the perfectionism sets in, the all or nothing mindset still creeps back in, because let's be clear, what we're talking about here is an identity shift that doesn't change within even 9 months. That's years of work, right?
Yes.
So I had like 4 clients in the past week who pre-trip, they were a little nervous. They were like, I don't want to undo my progress. That's always the comment that I hear.
Yeah.
And actually asking them to do themselves a favor and go ahead and not track anything and go ahead and just like take a step back from the process as a whole. It's like, let's just try this, because objectively speaking, we both know that within 7 days, you're not gaining 4 or 5+ pounds of actual material body fat. So there's nothing that's going to get undone in the way that like we may perceive it to. And then 2, let's just see what happens when you get back. Every single person had a scale drop. And they're like, this is so crazy. And I'm like, what's not crazy about it is that's you trusting yourself. That's you just leaning into the process, because I guarantee if I asked you to describe to me what types of decisions you made on that trip, you put more thought into certain things that you ate relative to your life pre being inside of the Fitness Fix, right? I guarantee you intentionally ate more protein. Maybe it wasn't as much protein as you would have eaten at home on a random Tuesday in between meetings for your work lunch, right? Like that's a different story because you had more options available to you. But I guarantee compared to the last trip you went on 2 years ago, it was more protein than then. And I think sometimes it's a little tough for people to try to zoom out and see some of those wins because they're so caught up in like week over week, month over month. How can I get a little bit closer to where I want to go versus like who was Krysta on that trip in 2022 versus who is Krysta on this trip in 2024, right?
Yes. And that's something I love you brought that up. I ask my clients all the time, like, what would 1 year ago you have done in this situation? And they're like, ooh, because we're so negative. Humans are so negative focused. And it's like, well, I could have done better and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, hold on. Because progress is progress, right? This was way better. You felt way better. Like, let's point out all the positives. And if there was stuff that you don't feel great about, well, let's talk about that stuff too, because we can learn from that as well. We can learn more from that stuff, I think, than people realize. And it's well worth reflecting upon. But yeah, I think the big point I want to bring up as part of this is that there's never a time where you're not going to really be thinking about it. It just becomes a little bit more ingrained in you. When I go on a trip, I'm still setting some anchor points for myself. So like I went to Europe in the fall and I am very experienced. Okay. But I still was like, hey, Meryl, you're going to eat protein with each meal. You're going to eat 2 fruits and 2 veggies during or in the day somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these type of things, they're still going to happen. And it happens because I set those things forth for myself because I feel better when I do them.
Right. And that leads me to a bigger picture question that I'm curious if you thought about before, because since it's been coming up for me a lot, and that's why I brought it up even inside of this conversation, is why do you think people even say that they want to get to this place of not having to think about it? Like, where is that coming from?
Effort, but it's not. It's so funny because especially I think the people that we both work with, like they put in a lot of freaking effort. Effort is usually
every area of their life. Like that's not the issue.
Yeah, it's not. It's just, I think it's been such a confusing thing for people up into the point that they're just like, well, I don't even want to think about it because it's so confusing and frustrating and makes them feel badly about themselves.
It's a mirror of being like, I'm not good at this thing and I'm good at a lot of things. And why am I not good at this thing?
Yes,
but then
exactly.
The real question becomes, how can we create these awareness points and, like you're saying, these anchor points, which I love, to remind ourselves that everything else that we happen to be good at in other areas of our life, were we good at them from the minute we started doing them?
Yes. We weren't, but like agree is there's parallels that we can draw in our lives in so many other areas. And that helps our mind so much where we get in our own ways. So if you can think about, a lot of people feel confident in their job. So, hey, were you great? Like, were you a master at your job when you first started? No, you had to like go through certain steps. You had to learn, you had to do all these things. And like it's not that different when it comes to your fitness or your nutrition.
And yet I'll even add, it's not only is not that different, arguably is even more important because you got to eat no matter what. Like, yes, you do need to have a job to make money, right? But like, if you wanted to get like super existential about this, I have a coach that I work with who's like, everything that's a need is technically a want because he's like, you could be homeless. Like, and technically.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like I've never really thought it from that perspective, but he's right. And yet when it comes to sustenance for life, like you do have to eat. That is a need, right?
Yeah.
And so it's fascinating the amount of resistance we'll put on that relative to these other things in our life where like we're willing to kind of like grit through it if it is a little bit tough or accept the fact that we may be a beginner at it at some point. And yet with food, no one wants to be that way. And what I always think about is the fact if you like really walk it back to the whole concept of eating, like from when you're a baby, nobody ever teaches you how to eat. It like think about for anybody listening to this who's never thought about this before, and my clients know this because I say this a lot. I say this often when I give presentations to just like really get people to understand why they may have a funky relationship with food is if you go all the way back to when you were you were transitioning to table food. Someone just put food in front of you and there wasn't necessarily a conversation about that. And that's no fault of parents, caregivers, whatever, because the same thing happened to them, right? So it's like this cycle that never got addressed.
Yeah.
And so now here you are at age 25, age 30 something, age 50 something, age 60 something. And we're trying to undo patterns that you have held on to for years. And we're also very complicated by some of the confusing information and the information that contradicts each other because now you're going on the internet and searching different things and trying different things, just like you talked about in your own journey, from paleo to macros to all the different things we could potentially attempt.
1,000%.
Yeah. It's this weird thing when you think about it that way. Like I have no other way to describe it.
Yeah. It can be very empowering because everyone's like, oh, well, it's my fault. Something's wrong with me. I'm broken, all these things. And it's like, well, if you think about it, really, I call these inherited legacies. I learned that from someone else. I didn't make it up.
I like that.
But it's like, if your grandma grew up during the Depression, there's going to be a lot of things that are instilled then that go to your mom or your dad, that go to you, that you don't know where that came from. That's a barrier. And guess what? You can break that cycle. It's just taking awareness and recognition of that and how it's affecting you. I tell people all the time, like, we're not mindful eaters because think about the amount of time that you've been, or the time when you've been forced to eat and the amount of time that you've been allotted to eat. You know, you got 10 minutes for school lunch and it was 10:30 in the morning. My husband is in the military, like he went through basic training. They had like, I don't know, a minute to eat. So like you're being forced to eat really fast. You're being forced to eat at certain times and you're so out of tune with your hunger and fullness cues. And then that goes into hormone health as well. Sure. So there's so many things here that can be big barriers for us.
So knowing that this has layers, right? And knowing that we can kind of keep going a little bit further through each one, what perspective do you give to the person who is like, hey, Krysta, Meryl, I hear what you're saying. I can acknowledge what you're saying, but because of the confusion and the frustration, I really don't know where to start. What is your best recommendation for somebody on how to start to build some of this self-awareness?
Starting really, really small, lowering the barrier of entry, especially for, if you're a high achiever and you want to do all the things, you're probably trying to do way too much all at once. And that is going to definitely lead to burnout. So, let's focus on a couple small habits, and it's going to be way smaller than you want it to be. Let's focus on those things. Let's gain some confidence and some experience and some trust in yourself. I think you said that, and that's a huge thing for people. They need to be able to trust themselves and know that they're not going to let themselves down. And again, really paying attention to how these things actually ripple for them, how it leads into their behaviors. If they're having thoughts, belief systems that come up that they don't feel great about, let's dig into those a little bit more. Where do they come from? Do you want to keep those? No? Cool. What's your new belief system? Let's move forward. And I think one of the lead dominoes here is language.
Language is huge. I was just thinking about this today with a conversation I had with a client recently, just around kind of what I was saying earlier, like the whole devil and angel of like knowing what's going to serve them versus how they continue to show up. So much of the block that I see in this scenario, and it's not just specific to this one person, it just happens to be top of mind, is the constant wording and messaging of I can't, or I'm this age and I've been this way for so many years. You just can't change that. That's a choice. And sometimes as a coach, it's difficult. It's taken me a few years of, the art of coaching and the nuances with it to first recognize that not everybody, like you could try to help as many people as you want to help. And there's a level to which the person has to be open to receiving it. And if they're not, they're not, and that's not on you. And it's tough because you said this at the very beginning, like having that level of compassion. I'm sure you have dealt with those situations where you like take it personally because it's coming from a place of love. It's coming from you wanting to really help this individual. But there's sometimes a point of saying, maybe I have to let this person, like let them go a little bit so that they can see that they're going to continue to be stuck in their ways. But at the same time, I find it difficult to just like fully let it go because I know that what could be on the other side for them is so amazing and so freeing that it's like we're playing a big game of psychology here. And a lot of my most successful clients also have therapists, also have other coaches that they work with. And I'm a huge believer in that because this is complex in the sense that your belief system, it may be showing up in food, right? In the context of your nutrition, in the context of your training, but it trickles into everything that you do on a regular basis.
Yes. And I agree. Like, I think it's great when I'm kind of part of a team as someone's coach and they have a mental health professional that they're working with. Maybe they're working with another coach as well let's say I'm their nutrition coach. They have a different strength coach, those type of things. I think it's freaking awesome when people have that. And the fixed mindset is so strong. And when you feed into it and when you repetitively tell yourself you can't, like, what do you expect? And so even adding, that simple word yet onto the end of the sentence can really shift. If you're someone who's continually telling yourself, you're listening here and you're like, I can't do that. Just say, I can't do that yet. It opens up so much opportunity for you. And it's a very, very small, little powerful word.
I love that. I haven't heard that before. I think that's going to be the name of the episode. No, seriously. And I love that if the fact that it's a really small word, right? It's something really simple, but the way that sentence lands is completely different.
You can feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So well said. That's beautiful.
Thanks.
When you've had clients who have shifted to that place of, hey, I can't, to, I can't do that yet. What are some of the wins that you start to see for them in terms of their new behaviors, the day to day?
Oh my God. It's like this huge shift and it happens everywhere. And I think that's the coolest thing is people really start to see what's possible. They're more on their side, so to speak. So they will start to show up in their life a lot more confidently and intentionally and make choices that are really, really supporting them and serving them. And even like digging into the stuff that they're like, yeah, I didn't really like that. Okay, well, how can I make it better? Leaning into growth and how you can get better from something is, like happiness can be there. Confidence is there. All of these things that people really want to feel. And that makes you want to show up so much more. So that's where I see it's like, I'm getting excited thinking about it because it's so freaking exciting for us as coaches to see our clients step into their power and just like take the reins and like do. It's just so freaking cool.
And what I want to add there and just kind of recap one of the points you just made, we talked about confidence, energy, how you feel. There is no mention of weight loss or fat loss or changes to the scale. And yet I can say that the person who latches on to the feeling, to the behaviors that are actually serving them and making them feel really good, that is a time where I would promise you that the fat loss will come, that the muscle gain will come, because you're doing it for the reason of how it makes you feel inside. It's so much easier to stick to.
So much easier to stick to is like spot on. I think I really encourage my clients to think of those more as a byproduct.
Yep.
If they're at that stage in their journey, it's like, I promise you that these things will come. When you focus on doing the things that support you feeling the way that you want to feel, if you want to feel proud of yourself, you're going to do the thing you said you're going to do. If you want to feel, good in your body, you're going to do the things that help you do that. When you focus on those things, they will lead to the aesthetic part.
Absolutely. I recently did a group coaching call with our clients and I used the analogy of an ice cream sundae. And I did like a little visual. I'll send it to you because I feel like you would like this. Yeah. I created like a little graphic of an ice cream sundae. And what I asked them to think about before I like teed it up, because basically where this was all going was I wanted to paint the picture that the fat loss was the cherry on top of the ice cream sundae. And what's interesting is when you think about an ice cream sundae, and I ask them the question, like, what are your favorite parts of an ice cream sundae? Like, what are the things that are key ingredients? What was interesting about how they answered, but I expected this, so I did it on purpose. No one said the ice cream. Everyone said the whipped cream, the sprinkles, maybe like cookie dough, all the other things that you were putting on top, all the other toppings. And I didn't include the cherry until the very last slide so that I could really illustrate my point. But what I thought was so interesting was the fact that no one said the ice cream. And what my analogy was, well, hello, you can't have an ice cream sundae without the ice cream. Are you just going to put a bunch of whipped cream and maybe like some other things in a bowl and call it an ice cream sundae? You can't do that. The ice cream is the foundation. And those are the most important habits: the getting enough sleep, the hitting protein goals, the making commitments to yourself and going and training and keeping them. Doesn't have to be perfect all the time, right? But 80+% of the time, 90+% of the time. And when you know that that foundation is so strong and that's there, well, then it makes the rest of it even better. And I just thought it was so fascinating how everyone wanted to like skip that part, right? And go right to the toppings on the sundae.
I love that analogy so much. And I'm gonna steal it from you.
Please.
Yeah. I use that. I use the
it.
house. Yeah, I love that. And I use the house all the time, like building a foundation for a house is like, that house ain't gonna last very long, that beautiful kitchen, you built all the things. The foundation. And that's what I think so many people skip. And I get it. They're boring things. Mm-hmm. Although I'm petitioning to make them sexy things.
Yeah.
That's where, I have all of my clients. That's where we start. You gotta start with the basics, the foundations. And when you focus on doing these things, like you're going to be like, oh, heck yeah, I could do anything for the rest of your life.
Right. And really focusing on their application too, I think is really important to address, because this has recently come up for me with newer clients who are just newer to the process of tracking their food, learning about the importance of nutrients, understanding the role that protein, carbohydrates, and fat each individually and collectively play into their diet. And I had somebody ask me what was a very good question for someone who's new to this process was, hey, are my macros at the point to where I can expect to lose body fat? And totally fair question. But
Yeah.
what I wanted this person to actually see is there's no magic macros until you start hitting them. So what I said to her was the better question, and I wouldn't expect her to know this, but I was excited to have this conversation, is can we establish the choices, the behaviors, the food preferences, all of those options to get you to a place where those macros are magic for you because you're actually hitting them. Like macros don't mean jack shit unless they work for you. And the way they're going to work for you is when you're implementing them, right? And I could insert any other type of diet. It doesn't just have to be macros. Like obviously that's what I have a bias towards because I see the success that you can have with it. But I just thought it was really interesting and like a good reminder for me in that sometimes as a coach, when you have been doing this for so long, like in your own personal life, you get away from those types of thoughts or questions or conversations because it's just naturally not crossing your mind. But at some point, that totally crossed my mind. I kept thinking, like, when I was really new to the process of learning how to track my food and working with my own coach for the first time, I kept saying to myself, like, okay, like when is this all going to kind of come together for me? And like, when is there going to be that flip that switches? And what I can see now is it had nothing to do with what was being assigned to me. It had to do with how I showed up inside of it, right? Like the application piece is everything.
Yes. I love it so much. And that's, macros are kind of like the rage these days, which I love. Also, let's dig into how they actually do support you when you use them in the quote unquote right way.
Right.
For you, because that could be different for for anybody. But it's not just like another diet you do. It's a way to gain flexibility for yourself and like really gain experience in what works for you. And we still need to be consistent and align our behaviors to what we're doing, because tracking macros, if you ain't tracking them accurately and you're not paying attention to the behaviors that are happening between the lines, the macros aren't going to work for you. They're not magic.
Right. And I'll take that one step further and say, it's also learning how to not diet, right? Because when we're in this constant perpetual state of pursuing changes, you got to pay attention. Like, and I take this part, like for me, this is like such a big piece of my personal story. If you put yourself in this situation where it's like, okay, when I track, I operate this way. And then when I don't track, I operate this completely different way. Well, then yeah, tracking's not for you. But what I really think is it's about, at least in my own experience, and I want to clarify with that because it can be different for everybody, but it's really about creating the space to have those types of conversations, to pay attention, like you said, of like, what are you actually doing? What kind of choices are you making? How are those choices making you feel? Because otherwise it can just turn into you being like, okay, for 12 weeks, I'm going to track my food. I'm going to dial it in. I'm going to be disciplined, blah, 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 blah. And then those 12 weeks end, you see this result that you do like, but then it's like, what happens on the other side? So much of my first like 3 years of learning how to understand my food in terms of their nutritional value, in terms of macro experience, was that. And it turned into the yo-yo of like always losing the same 10 to 15 pounds. And the level of maturity, like the unlock that came through for me, was actually paying attention to what I was doing when I was not tracking. And I started to have these rules in my head where I was like, okay, well, if I don't track, then that just means I could like eat like an a-hole. And it's like, is that really serving you? No.
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up because it is so important. And I see that a lot. And when my clients decide like, hey, well, I wasn't going to track this. I went through the conversation in my head and I decided to, and that felt actually really good for me. Mm-hmm. And it helped me because in the past I would have gone and been like, oh, screw it. Already messed up. I'm just going to, then go into coping mechanisms or getting into that spiral of shame and guilt that do not help whatsoever, don't align whatsoever. And instead just being like, okay, well, I did this. Let's dig into it. Or even like, hey, when we're talking about intentionality, you intentionally going over your macros
Yep.
is way better, and it's not going to hinder your progress than you being like, I'm going to go over, so I'm just not going to track.
Yeah, that's why when we first get started inside of our program, we ask people like, say, hey, this is your bare minimum for these targets. This isn't like stay color within the lines. This is like intentionally go over the lines a little bit here. And that flip of that switch takes you from lack to abundance so fast. It also helps you set yourself up in a way that like, whatever that target is that we might be setting for you, it doesn't feel so intimidating because we base it off of how you're currently eating. And I love what you mentioned about like taking the time to reflect of like, hey, why not put it like, why not track it and just see where it was? That literally happened to me yesterday. My hunger cues have been all over the place because I was about to start my cycle and I did. And I knew that that's where it was coming from because I've built that awareness about my behavior and how I feel and my energy levels and all these different things. And last night I was like, I just really want ice cream. I really want something salty. Like I wanted these like combinations of all different things. So I was technically done with my macros for the day and I am in a calorie deficit. So I was having that conversation with myself of like, do I really need this? But I was also like, you know what? This is actually a really important learning opportunity for me to say, hey, let me go ahead and eat this food, whatever combination of food I decide, and log it at the same time. And what happened when I logged it, it wasn't as quote unquote bad as what I perceived it to be had I not logged it, because I would have told myself this story of like, you failed, you started to like go down this like, you were skirting the line of like binging. And that wasn't it at all. It was like an extra, like maybe 250 calories. And calories aside, like where it actually landed within my macro targets, like it was really, really minimal compared to what I would have told myself today had I not even logged it. So just another point for self-awareness being such a great tool because I felt so much better about it too. And that's what matters.
Yes. Yes. Times infinity.
Yeah. So I know that you had a hard stop, so I do want to be respectful of your time. And we could probably go on and talk about these things forever.
Forever.
But what I'd love to do to close out this episode, and I actually got away from this for a minute with having guests on, so I'm bringing it back with you. We're going to do a little rapid fire and just ask you some fun questions. You ready?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. If you could only eat one food, like one meal for the rest of your life, only one option, Meryl, what is it?
Burger and fries.
Girl, I knew we were friends for a reason. That's my answer. Amen. I always joke that if I was going to rebrand the Fitness Fix, there'd have to be some reference to burgers or like maybe a burger in the logo because I'm passionate about that too.
I love it.
You still get your protein and it tastes delicious. You can put a lot of toppings on it. So versatile. That's a hill that I will die on. Yeah.
I'm there with you.
If you could only do one exercise, like a specific lift, movement pattern, however you want to take it for the rest of your life, what are we doing?
Deadlifts.
Nice. Practical. Like it.
Yeah.
Least favorite exercise. What are we taking away?
Oh, running. I'll walk fast. I got long legs, but running ain't it for me.
My brothers signed me up for a High Rocks event, and I'm like, every week it gets a little closer, and I'm like, okay, how are we gonna do it? It winds up being like 5+ miles of running, and you just don't realize it. And we'll see. I'll let you know. It's June 1st. I'll report back to you if I'm still by then.
You will be. I'm excited to hear about it.
I literally I'll do like 10 minutes on the treadmill. I'm like, okay. But to everything you said before about like small baby steps habits, like I started with like 5 minutes, threw in some sprints, then I would increase it. And like, it's not as bad, but before it felt like, yeah, I'm with you. I don't want to run. Don't make me run. So I feel you there. Let's see. We'll take it the more like podcast, self-development, books kind of route. You have any favorite books you've recently read or podcasts that you're listening to?
Oh, that's such a hard question. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. I'm going to shout out my mentor, Paul O'Neid, because his podcast, Coach's Corner University, is awesome.
Cool.
I I want to say like one of my big books that was like a game changer for me. I haven't read it recently. Well, two, The Four Agreements. That
Great
was
book.
like a huge game changer for me in my personal development journey. And then Untamed. Have you read it?
I have.
Yeah.
I have. Yeah. I have read both of her books, Untamed and Love Warrior, and they got me through one of the most challenging times of my life and like just really changed my perspective. Love Warrior actually more so. I'll say maybe like I have a little bit of a different perspective, but I actually liked that book more. I don't know if you've read that one. But if
I
you
haven't read it yet,
you should
so
read it.
I will.
Yeah.
Okay.
I personally like that one a little more. And I was like, you don't need to read them in a specific order, but that one just like resonated with me. And I don't know if it was what I was going through at the time of my life, but yeah, two very life changing, impactful books that I still like reference today and think about a lot. So, final question. If somebody could only take one thing away from this conversation today, you had to boil it down to one takeaway. What are you leaving them with?
I think the very simple thing is that if you are canting yourself, if you're getting in your own way, is just add that little yet to the end of your sentence.
So well said. I love it. Tell everybody where we can find you. How can they stay connected with you? I'm going to put your Instagram and all that good stuff down in the show notes.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm on Instagram often at Meryl CBC, at Wicked Iron Strength, wickedironstrength.com, Meryl at wickedironstrength.com.
Perfect. Well, Meryl, thank you so much. This was so much fun. I'm so glad we
So
put
much
this on the
fun.
calendar, and I can't
Me
wait for
too.
everybody to tune into the episode. And for those of you who joined today, you guys know the deal. If you got some value out of this conversation, we need you to do two things. First, make sure you give a review for the show. We got to get our reviews up. We have some high 5-star reviews, but we need a few more. So this may be the episode that you decide to go smash that 5-star button. So please do that. But even more importantly, share it. If you got even one piece of information that helped you in some way and you think it could benefit somebody else, share it with them. This podcasts are great ways to start conversations with people. And just if you don't know how to unpack where you want to go and what you want to do to start to make changes in your own life, you can listen to all the podcasts you want, but you also got to take some action too. So 2 little tidbits for you guys to take away from this today. And as always, from wherever you're listening from, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks, Meryl.
Thank you.